Josh
Maybe they're the
Paunil,
Guy Fieri sliders.
PhillyMag.com. No, they're good. They're good. PhillyMag.com is with us. Last week he wouldn't eat crab. This week he's having a slider. Josh Paunil is always out to dinner with us. How are you, Josh?
Hey, man, I'm good. And once again, man, I mean, week after week, I'm hearing these things about PT, and it's just, I don't know, man. What does the guy eat?
Carbs, and more carbs.
Meat, burger, steak, potato.
Well, I can
hit the four?
sympathize with the carbs.
We're all having a problem with that carb, but I know that he'll make a good choice on that menu. But Josh, one of these every time you're on, it seems like we're out on location somewhere. So we'll have to get you a dinner with us one of these times. But hey, we know this game's not till Monday. But there's a lot of things we can look back on, and as you do so well with that All-22, I think you do a good job this week looking at Carson Wentz, because here's a guy that played very well, and everybody was really praising, wow, he seems to be ahead of the curve, and he's reading the defenses, and nothing's confusing him, and he doesn't play like a rookie, and, you know, who were some of the guys he was getting compared to? Well, he's got Peyton Manning and Brett Favre. You look at this game against maybe one of the better defenses he's going to face in his career. What are some of the things you saw in this game compared to where he was a couple of weeks ago? Would you say that he is regressing a little bit, or what are some of the things you see from him?
Well, I would say that relative to his hot start, he has regressed just in terms of, I mean, a few things that stand out. One thing that Doug Peterson has talked about is the set target line. And what that refers to is making sure, you know, your feet, your eyes, your shoulders, and your whole body is kind of pointed to the direction you're throwing to. And that's one thing they've been working with Carson Wentz on. And against Seattle, that pops up from time to time, that Bryce Tregg long incompletion. I think it was the middle of the first quarter. It was a missed touchdown opportunity. That's a good example of his set target line wasn't very good. His feet and, you know, his footwork wasn't very good, so the throw wasn't very accurate. And so that's one thing that kind of stood out. Another thing is just kind of the timing. He's been kind of late on his throws, particularly against Seattle. That first interception that he threw, the Cam Chancellor one, I mean, that's something that should never happen. He threw the ball too late. He stared down the receiver. So there are things like that you've seen more recently, but you still come away. It's funny because I'll see bad plays, like where the end result is bad, but you still come away kind of feeling good about the kid because you expect these mistakes from a rookie, but the things you don't expect are, even when he's making these mistakes, his arm strength is incredible, and he's making plays where not every other quarterback can make. And then they're also just smooth plays like the Jordan Matthews 26-yard pass. I think it was the middle of the fourth quarter on that second touchdown drive. Just the way fitting it into the window and how he was able to get that ball, and there was a nice throw. So he's definitely playing worse than he was earlier in the season, obviously, but at the same time, he's still doing things. He has a lot of those wow throws that NFL scouts like to see, and so that's why you still can't help but feel pretty good about the future of this kid.
Yeah, I want to ask you then, when you watch the film, do you surmise that these wide receivers are hurting his development, are stunning his growth? I mean, when you watch this film of him, do you look that, man, if he had better receivers, this guy would look even more advanced than maybe he is for a rookie?
Well, he would definitely look more advanced just because you would have guys helping him out. I mean, there are plays like the Nelson Agholor drop. I'm sure you guys have talked plenty about it this week, but going back on the film, it was just, came away so impressed with Wentz on that play because, you know, first of all, Nelson Agholor ran a great route against Richard Sherman. I thought it was a really good example of how Nelson Agholor, does he display the talent that you would expect or hope for from a first-round pick? Not really, but he's clearly capable of playing in the NFL. And so that's why you can really see how it's his confidence and the mental things that are hurting him. Because on that drop, great route against Richard Sherman. So he runs that route, drops the ball. But part of the reason Nelson Agholor was so open, besides running a good route, was Carson Wentz completely moved Earl Thomas out of the play with his eyes. He essentially stared down Jordan Matthews to the left. Earl Thomas probably thought he was going to get an easy pick. And he basically made Earl Thomas run the complete opposite direction, really opening up the middle of the field. And that was something that Pete Carroll really talked about, was how well Carson Wentz move the Seahawks secondary with his eyes. And so you see plays like that, but they don't really get much attention or praise because the end result is a drop. So that really doesn't show up in the box score at all, because even though Carson Wentz made a good play himself, his receiver's not helping him out. So I wouldn't say it's really hurting his development and kind of his prospects as a quarterback, but it's definitely hurting just his production right now in his rookie season.
Josh Paunil with us as we talk Eagles Seahawks and also look ahead to the Eagles game on Monday night with the Packers. And Josh, in your instant observations, one of the things that jumped out at you was the design of the play to Zach Ertz on the touchdown call. If you could go into that a little bit and why you thought that was such a well-designed play.
Yeah, well, it was an interesting play because the Eagles ran really an old-school West Coast staple, but they did it in a unique way. So one thing that's really constant in West Coast offenses are these things called stick routes. I mean, you can kind of think of them as a curl. You know, you run however many yards you want, 5, 8, 10, whatever the number is, and then you stick your foot in the ground, turn around, get the ball. So on this play, they run a double move where it's Brent Selleck. He's in the middle of the bunch, and he runs a stick nod. So he fakes the stick route, goes into the seam, draws the attention of a linebacker, and he brings the linebacker, deeper into the end zone, opening up the underneath part of the field. And so Zach Ertz, he also runs kind of a double move where he goes to the outside, runs a pivot route back inside. Nice route, obviously big enough to get into the end zone. The underneath was opened up because of the route design. Just an overall well-designed play by Doug Peterson.
One of the things Mike and I talked about as we visited with Josh Paunil was that they did have some success running the ball against the Seahawks. Now, I know on Monday we talked to Scott Grayson. He was surprised the Eagles didn't come out and try to run right away. They put the pressure on Wentz to maybe make a good play. But if you could go through your thoughts on the running game, despite the fact that they lost a couple key guys, too.
Yeah, and that was something that I also was surprised by that, because I think the past few games, whether it was especially that Giants game, I thought there was a little too much criticism of the run-pass differential, just because, when you give up 14 early points like the Eagles did against the Giants, of course you're going to throw the ball way more than you're going to run it. That has a significant impact on the play calling. But this Seahawks game was one. It wasn't like the Seahawks got out to a big lead and just had a huge advantage on the scoreboard the whole game. And especially with the success that the Eagles had, I want to say they had, at least 60, maybe 70 rushing yards in the first half. You saw Jason Kelsey. He had another good game. I think he's been very, very much improved since the beginning of the season. Halapoulivaati Vaitai obviously has that grade 2 MCL sprain, but he really seemed to be settling in and progressing. Jason Peters missed some time, but he was solid. And then Zach Ertz, actually, he probably had one of the best run blocking games and pass blocking, just blocking in general. Zach Ertz, one of his best games of his career with that, whether it was chipping defensive ends in the pass game or kicking out DBs in the run game. Zach Ertz played well. Jason Kelsey blocked well. So that's why, even though Ryan Matthews and Darren Sproles, their status is unclear going forward, with Wendell Smallwood, they should still have some success because the offensive line has been improving and adjusting for life without Lane Johnson.
Yeah, I was going to ask you because this line, you had Barbary play left tackle, then he played right tackle. You have Wiz coming in. You're going to have Barbary going back to right this week. Vaitai's out. Johnson's out, obviously. You lost Peters for a little while, and yet the line's still pretty good. And as you guys kind of touched on, I thought they ran the ball really well for a couple of plays behind Wiz and Peters. They were working that left side, and they got away from it. But even with the injuries and even all the movement, they still should be able to run the ball. And if they want to make the playoffs, Josh, isn't that their formula, going behind that line, which turns out hasn't been all that bad?
Yeah, it absolutely is their formula. I mean, that's been it, is, holding teams as well as they can on defense, taking field goals if they need to, and just really having a big advantage in time of possession. Really, the Falcons game was the perfect example of the formula. Obviously, a really good team and a really good offense that they beat, and they did it because they held the ball for a lot longer. They had a lot of success in the ground game. Defense got off the field on third down. So that's what they're going to need to do. Even though the Eagles were down for much of that game in Seattle, you have to, stay with the run as long as you can, because when it comes down to it, you don't want your rookie quarterback throwing the ball 45 times against one of the best secondaries in the NFL. That's just not a recipe for success. So you have to remain committed. Unless something crazy like the beginning of the Giants game happens, you really have to stay committed to the run and try to not just gain yards and put together drives, but just hold on to the ball.
Hey, Josh, I want to get your take on, after this game, you look at the defense, and, the talk last week was, well, we think we're on the level of Seattle. A couple of big plays, some runs, some really bad tackling in the secondary. What did you learn about the defense after last week?
Well, Jalen Mills was pretty bad. I mean, that was one of my biggest takeaways was, he early in the season, he had very understandable struggles against guys like Antonio Brown, Alshon Jeffrey. You didn't really expect him to go and winning any of those matchups. But I thought, especially in the game before against the Falcons, the Eagles even had Jalen Mills shadowing and following around Julio Jones in the second half. Now, part of it was due to injury to the other cornerbacks, but it also was a sign of the confidence that Jim Schwartz and the Eagles have in their seventh-round pick. But this week, whether it was the run or the pass, he wasn't very good. The tackling, the angles he took, and then the pass game, that was kind of the bigger concern for me because you can't get faster. And that really is Jalen Mills' biggest problem in coverage is guys can just run away from him. And obviously you can do different things as he spends more time in the league, gets more experience. He can learn some tricks of the trade to try to jam guys up. But at the end of the day, he's just not very fast, and that's why there's a ceiling on his play. And then just to have the defensive line not being able to bring down Russell Wilson was obviously the other big reason that they weren't able to pull out the win. Even when they got pressures, Russell Wilson was able to escape the pocket, make some throws. That Jimmy Graham touchdown is the perfect example, getting him out of the pocket, but they didn't finish the play. He completed the pass. It was a heck of a throw and a heck of a play, obviously, by Russell Wilson. But when you're playing that kind of a quarterback, you have to bring him down.
Josh Paunil with us, PhillyMag.com, Birds 24/7. And Josh, we haven't brought him up yet, but I'll bring him up now. Nelson Agholor, that's been on everybody's lips all week long. And today, Doug Peterson confirms that he's seen a sports psychologist. What's the latest on Nelson Agholor, and do you think he'll play Monday night?
Yeah, I do expect him to play on Monday night. I think really what it comes down to is if they keep four guys, or if they only activate four guys on game day, there's a possibility he won't be able to play, or he won't be dressed for the game. That's what they've done the whole season, I believe. I don't think they've had a game where they haven't had only four receivers dressed. But Monday night, I would expect them to dress five receivers, include Paul Turner in there. Ryan Matthews, it appears, even if he is available to play, it seems like he wouldn't be able to do much more than a few carries. So if, a guy's ceiling for the game is playing 5 to 10% of the snaps, I don't really think that's worth activating him. So I could see them going with five receivers, both Nelson Agholor and Paul Turner playing, but I don't think you'll see the same number of snaps. He's played an average of 85% of the offensive snaps per game this season. I would be shocked if it's that high. I would expect other guys, really everyone else, Bryce Tregg, Storial, Green Beckham, getting involved more. But also seeing if they're going to try to get Nelson Agholor some easy touches to get his confidence up. Maybe they want to give him a screen or something in the quick game that really should be easy and help his confidence, because the route running is much improved from last season. But obviously, if he's not catching the ball, it doesn't matter how good his routes are.
Josh, you mentioned Paul Turner, and he was like a cult hero. He's Mr. Lehigh. He's the guy, right? And do you think he can play? I mean, he hasn't been on the active roster. There's got to be a reason, right? Everybody wants to see him, and he had the most catches, and he had a great preseason. He was a fan favorite. But can he play? I mean, do you think that he should have been given a shot?
I mean, I don't really have any strong feelings about Paul Turner, just because there's no reason to think that, based off what we've been able to see, that this guy should have been on the roster. I mean, you saw him have some nice catches in the preseason, but when you're doing it against third-string and fourth-string guys, people who aren't even in the NFL right now because they didn't make rosters, you obviously have to take that with a huge grain of salt. You know, the concern with him has always been his size and his speed. Can he get open? Even if he has good hands, if he's not open, Carson Wentz isn't going to throw him the ball. So, and the other thing is he's an inside receiver, so you're moving Jordan Matthews, who's your best receiver, to the outside where he's not as good. So they're going to have Paul Turner probably get some reps. It's not guaranteed, obviously. It's not even guaranteed that he'll be active for the game, but it appears like he will be. But I really wouldn't expect much from him. Maybe he'll have one catch, maybe two catches, but he's really not a guy that you would expect to have any type of significant impact on the game. There's a reason he hasn't been even on the 53-man roster. I mean, with as bad as the Eagles receivers have been, the unfortunate truth for the Birds are that those are their four best receivers. So maybe Paul Turner surprises us, but I would be quite shocked if he had this huge impact on the game.
Yeah, you brought up an interesting point regarding if he plays, he's a slot guy, and that's Matthew's spot, really, where he excels. Now you're asking your best guy to do something that he's not the best at. So it doesn't seem that Turner would be a big factor. Real quick, Josh, your feeling on Sproles for this week. We know it's Wednesday and they play Monday, but is the anticipation that he'll go?
Yeah, I definitely think it's more likely than not that he does play. It seems more like a situation. I don't think he'll practice much this week, but I think that's more just because of why would you have the guy practice? He's banged up, but he's a veteran. He knows what he needs to do. It's not like Darren Sproles needs to practice every day this week to be ready to go. I do think it's more likely than not that he plays, and I would not be very concerned if I was an Eagles fan when I hear news about him either not practicing or being limited in practice, unless it's every day of the week that he doesn't participate.
Hey, one other thing. We talk about Agholor and the wideouts. This is a week that you would gain confidence, right? This secondary they're facing is awful. I mean, I think you could have 3 catches for 27 yards.
Well, I could definitely have 3 catches. I'm not sure I'd have 27 yards, but you're absolutely right. This is not a secondary that scares you. This is a secondary that if there is a game to get Nelson Agholor that confidence, it's against his secondary. Last week, obviously, that's a tough matchup for him, and he even got open. He actually got open early in the first quarter. I believe he turned around Earl Thomas. It was wide open, but Carson Wentz got sacked. So he actually got open a few different times against Seattle, so you'd think he would be able to get open against Green Bay. But obviously the key is how does he handle this week mentally? Is he able to bounce back? Is he able to not overthink things? Can he get out of his own head? And Monday night's going to be a pretty good sign of what's this guy's mental capability like? How does he respond to adversity?
How many yards per catch would that be, PT?
I have no idea.
3 for 27. That's 9, PT.
Sorry.
I have no idea. He stared at me and said, "Josh, I know that you could get yak yards. I know you're a big guy. You get yards after the catch.
This Thanksgiving
don't sell
Eve,
yourself
you
short."
don't want to be saying yak on Thanksgiving Eve.
All right, Josh Paunil, PhillyMag.com, Birds 24/7. Happy Thanksgiving to you, Josh, and enjoy the game on Monday night.
Happy Thanksgiving to you two guys. Thanks.